What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks for Sports Illustrated on Fan Nation. We are doing a live edition of the podcast. You can watch it on YouTube over at Oregon Football Max Torres. I'm joined by Ducks Digest reporter Nick Batty, who was in Las Vegas for the Pac-12 championship game. Obviously, was covering the game for us over there, and then was at the press conference after talking with Mario Cristobal with the other reporters. So if you're watching on the live show, thank you guys for tuning in. Always appreciate the support and been fun to get these things going a little bit more recently. And then if you're watching on replay, go ahead and drop a comment right now. Just tell me kind of where your head's at, right? You know, it's been a crazy weekend for Oregon football, Oregon athletics. They just had that loss to Arizona State in overtime. Our Billy Spots was over there, so he'll have a recap story for that. So yeah, just drop a comment. Let me know kind of where your head's at as an Oregon fan with everything that's going on. That was a very long intro, but Nick, man, how we doing with all the news? I know you got a final tomorrow with school kind of winding down for the term. How you doing?
Yeah, well, you got to remember with all these student athletes and myself as well, it's finals week. So, I mean, I can only imagine, it's been a draining day for me. I can only imagine what it's been like for the players and the recruits and, how tough it must be for them to handle, school and finals coming up. And also, the future of the football program is in the balance right now. So, I think I've been everyone. We've just been, on our phones all day, refreshing Twitter and seeing what's going to happen. So,
Yeah, you talk about being on your phone all day. I went for a run a couple hours ago, and I was like, kind of thinking to myself, is this the right decision? Like, should I do this right now? I don't know. I feel like with my luck, something's gonna break as I go. But luckily it didn't. So we've kind of just been waiting in limbo, constantly checking Twitter, as you were saying, Nick. But it's so bizarre because I feel like we've seen any and everything reported today. Nothing's confirmed as we sit here recording this on the live show Sunday, December 5th, just after 8 p.m. on the West Coast. So we don't really know what's going on. And, we've just been, I don't know, we've just been thrown for a whirl. And we're just waiting to see what happens because, we talked to Mario earlier today after the Ducks got selected for the Alamo Bowl to face the Oklahoma Sooners at the end of the month in San Antonio. And that was probably the most empty press conference I've ever been to. I sent you the link. I don't know if you did you make it to the press conference?
yeah, I was there, and I don't even think you could call it a press conference per se, but it was a Zoom link at least, and I was on it as well. And they asked Mario 2 minutes of questions. He didn't say anything notable. Then they asked Oklahoma interim coach Bob Stoops some questions. He seemed pretty chipper and happy to be there. Mario seemed like he would rather be anywhere else, to be honest. But it was just a very weird situation with the backdrop of everything going on.
The energy at that press conference was very bizarre. I mean, because we got that link and it said the release in the email said media questions will not be permitted. So it was just such a bizarre tone. And then when we were there, listening to the coaches talking, there was crazy echo, so it was hard to listen, and it was just so bizarre. But it looks like we're starting to get some questions here, Nick. So let's see what we got here. First question coming from Mikey G. Thanks for the question. Thanks for tuning into the show. I think we saw you have a couple questions in the last one, if I remember correctly. So it's always fun to see people coming back. Who besides Wilcox is on deck for head coach? Assuming he's talking about Cal's head coach, Justin Wilcox. And, Nick, I think we've been kind of throwing some ideas back and forth as far as new names to think about. We don't want to get into it too much here because the news still isn't official. He could very well come back for all we know, but I know that you've had some names that kind of came to mind. So did you want to tackle this one first?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, of course, first of all, the best case scenario for Oregon here is Mario Cristobal returns as a head coach in 2022. There's no question about that. I don't think there's any coach out there that is going to help Oregon's program succeed as much as Mario. So that's definitely what we want to have happen. But uh, if Mario does end up leaving, some names that I kind of thought of: Kalani Sitake at BYU is a really interesting name. He went 5-0 against the Pac-12 this year, and he's someone that I think would be really interesting for Oregon to look at. Also, Dave Aranda, Baylor's head coach, in his second year at Baylor, he won the Big 12. He has had a really good defense in a really offensive league there in the Big 12. So that's a couple names I've been intrigued by, I guess you could say. Of course, there's been rumors and people talking about Chip Kelly, um, but I don't necessarily really see him coming back. But hold on, Max, you there? You there? I think you might have froze there. But yeah, that's kind of three names that really came to my mind. Besides Will Cox, who of course is also an interesting guy as well. Hey, you back?
Yeah, I think I'm back.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. Sorry about that. Okay. Wow, that we're good. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay. Can you bring your response over again for me, Nick?
Yeah. Well, kind of a couple names that came to my mind: Kalani Sitake at BYU, Dave Aranda at Baylor, and there have also been rumors about Chip Kelly at UCLA. Those are just some names that, off the top of my head, could come up for Oregon if Mario did end up leaving. Even though we hope that doesn't happen, of course, Mario is going to be the best option for Oregon moving forward.
Okay, yeah. So I know you said Aranda could maybe be somebody, and then and there's talks of him signing a new deal. I think he did sign a new contract with Baylor. So,
He did. But I mean, with this coaching carousel, I don't think anything is off the table if you offer someone enough money. So
yeah, no, I totally agree. And then let's see, the other name you mentioned was Chip Kelly, and I don't know. I feel like people I think Oregon fans could probably get excited about it and get behind it, but he hasn't done that great at UCLA. I was talking with our SI writer for UCLA, and Sam Connon, and he was saying that he really hasn't been super impressive, and I feel like the UCLA fan base is a little bit up in the air as far as retaining him. So
yeah,
I
I
think
definitely
that
agree.
we'll.
I don't really think Chip would be the first choice, and I also mentioned Kalani Sitake as well. That's probably maybe my first choice, even my first call. Uh, when you're looking at coaches, I think there would be a lot of mutual interest there potentially. Of course, there are some home run hires who are probably unrealistic. I've seen some people mention maybe give Chris Peterson a call, but I don't see that happening at all. If he were to come back and be interested to come back into coaching, I think he would have returned to Seattle and UW when their job was open earlier this winter or fall. So I don't see him coming back. But if we're looking a little more realistic, Sataki might be a guy.
Yeah, and Sataki's had a lot of success. Obviously, look at BYU sweeping through the Pac-12 this year, which I think has been one of the kind of underrated storylines of the year with them heading to the Big 12 here pretty soon. It's looking like. So I think he could definitely have the Ducks going pretty quickly, and especially a guy with Polynesian roots never hurts, especially with how the Ducks have rooted their identity at the line of scrimmage. I think kind of a cool overarching Nick would be, do you think would it make more sense to go offense or defensive side of the ball for someone like with their background and who you look for in a head coach for Oregon, should they be in the market for one?
Your initial thought would be offense, just because that's what Oregon has been the better part of a decade now, with Chip Kelly, Mark Helfrich, Willie Taggart, and Mark Cristobal. They're all offensive-minded coaches. So that would be the natural fit, I guess you could say, with this Oregon program. but I would go with the best, option available. If that so happens to be a defensive coach, such as Luke Fickell, I don't think Luke Fickell would leave Cincinnati with a playoff, but he's a guy that has been mentioned with some other jobs. You look at a Dave Aranda, those are two elite defensive minds who would really help this program moving forward. So, if two options were considered pretty similar, you might go offensively. But if you can get an elite defensive mind to Eugene, I wouldn't hate that at all.
Yeah, I mean, it could make a lot of sense too when you think about how Oregon's defense was when it was truly, truly dominant in that 2019 season, and that was really carrying them. I mean, not to say that their offense was bad, but when Marcus Arroyo was the OC, obviously, not everything was on the table. He wasn't pulling out all the tricks out of his pocket. When you see Justin Herbert in the NFL and how well he's doing. But we got another comment here from Jeff. I'm upset with the entire dynamic of the sport. Coaches loyal to money and self-interest rather than creating tradition and loyalty. I feel like it's definitely valid to feel this way when you're looking at how the coaching carousel has gone so far. I think when you look at a good example is Brian Kelly to LSU, because it kind of feels like a really lateral move. Because, I mean, Notre Dame, obviously they didn't make the playoff. We saw the final rankings tonight, but they were right there, and they've been to the playoff before. They consistently recruit at a top, certainly top 10, but I'd say between top 5, top 10 level, which is what you need to have sustained success. And then they put players out to the NFL every year. So I feel like they're in pretty good standing. And I don't know. I mean, for like something like that, talk about his fake accent and everything. That was just a whole nother crazy part of the move. But a move like that, I feel like you look at that and you can kind of see something like what Jeff's talking about here, how it's like, that's probably a move that is rooted in finances, even though he's never going to come out and say something like that.
Yeah, and Jeff definitely brings up a good point about all this. But I think in terms of looking at specifically Mario Cristobal's situation, I really don't think this is a money situation for him. I think this is completely more of a personal decision for him. His alma mater is Miami. His family lives in Miami. His mom is ill in Miami. There are a lot of personal reasons for him to return to Miami and try to build up the program he loved so much growing up. But then you look at what he has in Eugene. He was given an incredible opportunity 4 years ago by Rob Mullins and Phil Knight to become the head coach. And, he's really grown this culture with his players, and he preaches this culture. And I think, he really doesn't want to leave this great place in Eugene, what he's got going. And he probably feels really bad for the players if he were to ditch them after all this. So, I really think that's part of the reason why this decision has really drawn out throughout the last few days and probably into tomorrow, is that it really is a hard decision for him between going back to his alma mater and his dream school of what he's probably always wanted to do growing up, and in terms of the last 4 years and how much he's loved it in Eugene. I really don't think this is going to come down to money, and it's going to come down much more to what his family thinks is best, and you know all that.
I could definitely see where you're coming from there. Kind of the way that this discussion is going. I think a cool point to kind of bring up is just kind of advocating both sides. And you talked a lot about the situation and what it would look like for him to kind of go to Miami and what's at play from that side. But if I'm thinking about things at Oregon, I see people on Twitter talking about how they don't want Mario anymore. And I just can't, I'm just a little blown away by that because you see how the season's gone. Obviously it's not, the ideal ending by any means, but I feel like just with Cristobal as the head coach, look at how much higher the floor is of the program because of the elite recruiting. I think we're seeing that elite recruiting can only get you so far, but at the same time, this season was just so hard to evaluate overall because you get that win in Columbus over Ohio State. You and I were there. We were on the field with the team, with the coaching staff after that win. And it was just like cloud nine. Like that was probably that was the coolest moment, football moment that I think I've ever experienced. But I bring that up because that looked like it was a glimpse into Mario's vision of we're right there as far as being able to compete and being in the playoff conversation. And then all these injuries happen. You don't have the quarterback that you need to get to the playoff. I feel like that's obviously evident, and we can talk about that later. But I think that there's a lot at play for him to potentially stay here if I'm just looking at both sides of it. And then if you go to if you go to Miami, you're going to be competing with some of those SEC teams as far as recruiting goes. But you're probably going to do that while you're here at Oregon as well. Excuse me. And then Clemson's obviously having a down year. I'm just trying to think of which conference is easier for you to dominate. Because I feel like Clemson won't be down for long necessarily. But then, a lot of people want to make a lot about Riley getting hired at USC.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head about just about Cristobal's vision with this program and the floor of this program. Oregon had 15, 16 players, I believe, by the end of the year that were injured and out for the season at some point. And yet the depth of this team was still enough to where they won the Pac-12 North and made it to the Pac-12 championship game with 10 wins. While I think a lot of people are very emotional and rightfully so about how this Pac-12 season ended with two straight terrible losses, embarrassing losses. That's what they were to Utah. There's still a lot to be proud of with this program, and this program's still kind of in an upward trajectory right now, I would say. But that all crumbles down if he ends up leaving. You're no longer in that upward trajectory, and you're in a lot of disarray. I mean, your recruiting class is going to lose some commits for sure. Your current team is going to lose some transfers, no question about it. And that's just something that you don't want to have to deal with at all. If you're Oregon, you want to do everything possible to retain Mario Cristobal. And, next year you're going to have a new quarterback. So you're really hopeful that you can improve that position, because clearly it wasn't up to the standard necessary to perform at, a college football playoff level. But you're also going to have a new offensive coordinator. Joe Moorhead has officially left for Akron. And Cristobal's going to have another opportunity here to hire someone who is a really good play caller and also a really good developer of the quarterback position. And, I think no one's going to fault Joe Moorhead for leaving. It's a head coaching job, and he was an elite play caller. I think that's, a lot of the reason why they were able to beat Ohio State. But in his 2 years here, he wasn't really able to develop much of a quarterback. He had Tyler Shuck here. He had Anthony Brown here, and he had a couple freshman quarterbacks. And in those 2 seasons, quarterback was clearly a weakness of this team. So you really hope that if Mario were to stay, he can find an offensive coordinator, hire one that, is a good play caller, but maybe even more important, develops a quarterback at a really good level.
Yeah, quarterback development is such a big topic that so many people want to talk about, because if you're going to get to the playoff, you need a really solid quarterback. But it's kind of interesting to say that, because I feel like that's very obvious. But look at this Georgia team. I mean, Stetson Bennett, I don't feel like he's anything that special. He's a former walk-on, and all the credit to him. He's been playing really well. But I think you see, I'm trying to think of the point I'm trying to make here. UGA recruits at a top 5 level every year, top 3 even most years. So, there's that conversation with you can put a game manager back there and then just get the ball to the skill guys, and they can just put on a show. And then that UGA defense is obviously something serious, and that's been carrying them a lot. But you just need to get a star quarterback in here every year. I feel like you can never have too many quarterbacks. Sure, that might lead to some transfers, but you just need to give yourself options. And then also with this Oregon team, as far as where they're at, I think a reason that Ohio State win wasn't indicative of the whole season. You see all these injuries, and they're having to go into their depth, but there's drop-off. At those top-tier programs, there's no drop-off. So that's why I feel like if I'm kind of looking at the situation, it's like, stay a little bit longer, get some more elite recruiting classes in there, and then kind of maybe reevaluate after that.
Yeah, for sure. You look at just the players who played at Ohio State who didn't play in later games. You lost Bennett Williams for at least the regular season back in before the Stanford game. You lost C.J. Verdell for the season in that Stanford game. You lost a bunch of wide receivers throughout the season, and Johnny Johnson, Jalen Redd, and Micah Pittman. The list just goes on and on. Cam McCormick in that Ohio State game, he made that big catch. He was out for the year. And there are guys that didn't even play the whole year. And, Justin Flo, Patrick Herbert, and, you just keep going. The list, I can't even remember everyone. But um, when you get all those guys back and healthy, the team's going to look completely different. You had Jeff Bassa playing linebacker for most of the year. He's going to probably go back to safety next year, and that'll be a whole different look for the defense. So, with a full team, with another quality recruiting class that's supposed to come in, we'll hope they can get them locked up if Cristobal does end up staying. But the depth is going to be even better next year.
Got another comment from Mikey G that kind of had something I wanted to talk about here. So many problems at Miami. The question is whether he's willing to trade the keys to the castle for being at home. We already kind of talked about that, but can we just take a step back here and just look at what's going on at Miami? I mean, that's what makes this whole, there's dynamic after dynamic that's getting thrown into this whole coaching carousel, specifically with whether Cristobal will stay or whether he'll go. As we're recording this at 8:21 on the West Coast, they still don't have an AD unless they hired one while my internet crashed during this stream. So they still don't have an AD, and there's all this smoke around Cristobal filling a position that isn't even open right now with Manny Diaz still the head coach at Miami. It's so weird because if you're looking at it from Cristobal's perspective, what do you make of Miami for how they've handled it? Because we talked about how all the reports are coming out of the Miami market, not so much out of the Oregon market. It's just a really weird situation there.
Yeah, I've never seen something like this in college football coaching carousel before. The fact that a school does not have an athletic director, and the reports are that they're not going to hire an athletic director until they have a coach, which is kind of crazy. And oh, by the way, they haven't fired their coach. Manny Diaz is still their head coach, and he's probably going to stay their head coach unless they get Mario to come to Miami. It's just I don't remember anything like this at all. I really feel bad for Manny Diaz. I mean, he's out there recruiting. I don't know how you can possibly recruit right now if you're Manny Diaz and you're being hung like a thread right now with potentially getting fired any minute by a new coach coming in. It's just a really, really weird situation of how Miami's handling this. And, it's a program that hasn't even really been relevant for 20 years. And, I completely understand why Mario wants to go and revitalize that program. He won a national championship there as a player. But, you just kind of wonder, who's calling the shots over there and who are you really confident in helping lead the athletic department and the program to success if Mario did end up going.
It's been wild, but I'm glad that we touched on that dynamic. Let's see, we got another question that let's see. Okay, this one's from going all over the place again. All right, can you hear me, Nick?
Yep, you're good.
All right, sorry about that, everyone. Wow, this is like the worst my internet's been in a long time. Question from Tanis238: Does Oregon chase another transfer QB to provide some competition for Ty Thompson next year? This is a really interesting question. Obviously, we've talked a ton about the quarterback play. There's a lot to talk about just from what we saw in the Utah game, and maybe after this question we can pivot to that, Nick, because you were there. But when you're looking at the trajectory of the program and what things look like next year, if Thompson doesn't play in this game, in this bowl game, he only has hardly any. He has practically no experience. You look at him only playing in 3 games so far. That one half against Stony Brook was what he has. I feel like maybe this is going out on a limb, but I think Georgia, the first week of the year, is going to look a little different and probably a whole lot better than Stony Brook. And there were reports about Oregon making a push for Spencer Rattler, which I feel like I'm still kind of torn on. But I mean, things weren't the best for him this year at Oklahoma, but he's definitely proven that he can make some plays. And like I said, you want to have someone that, has some experience, and you just need to try to keep taking shots at quarterbacks. And then with Rattler, at least he would probably be here for multiple years versus a grad transfer type situation where you're looking at a 1-year rental.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say this before answering the question. I believe Ty Thompson should be starting and playing in the Alamo Bowl.
100%.
Yeah, 100%. You look at, you need to know what you've got in Ty Thompson. And so far, I mean, all you really can go off of is practice against the second stringers. And I don't think that's nearly good enough. Next year, week 1, you play at Georgia. Well, technically in Atlanta, neutral site against Georgia, but it's going to be pretty much a Georgia home game. And you're going to need to know what you have in Ty Thompson for that game. And I think a game against Oklahoma, a premier program in the country that has some really talented athletes on both sides of the ball, I think that's a great opportunity for you to see exactly what you have in Ty Thompson. And that can help you answer this question about if you're going to need a transfer quarterback or not. If Ty Thompson shows he's ready and plays really well in that game, then maybe you don't need to go after a transfer quarterback. And you can really just say, hey, we're all in on Ty Thompson. We're really confident in him. If he doesn't play very well, then yeah, you probably do need to go get a transfer quarterback, unfortunately. And fortunately for the Ducks, there are plenty out there. You mentioned Spencer Rattler. Quinn Ewers is in the transfer portal, even though he doesn't have much experience either. He's extremely talented. I just saw today Michael Penix from Indiana is in the transfer portal, and he has had some really good years at Indiana.
Wow.
So, yeah, that happened just today. So there are going to be a lot of options for the Ducks in the transfer portal if they wanted to go that route. And I think you could answer this question much better if you could see what Ty Thompson can give you against Oklahoma in a few weeks.
Totally agree on that. So we'll have to see, that's the next big question aside from who's going to be coaching the game. Obviously that's the biggest one, but what does the quarterback situation look like? Because I think what has a lot of fans frustrated, I feel like, is that you've seen quality, you've seen all these other positions performing at such a high level. And it's been so hit or miss with Brown. His highs are really high and then his lows are just absolutely terrible. So it's just, that's the one position that you've really got to hit on. And I don't even know how much credit I can give the staff for hitting on Justin Herbert, because he was a virtual no-name when it came to recruiting. And I feel like, the fact that he was on the roster and he got thrown in when they didn't have any other options, with Dakota Prukop just playing terribly when he was here. So I don't know.
And the staff that hit on him was Mark Helfrich's staff, not the current staff at all.
Exactly. So we have to see what develops there. I think there was another question about Andy Avalos. So I'm trying to bring that up real quick. Just talking about if he would potentially, be a candidate here. So let me see if I can find it. Sorry, it's taking me so long to scroll here. Okay, here we go. Question from Donna Chide. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Thanks for the question. Would Andy Avalos be the next Ducks head coach? I think he's an interesting name to look at, just because, and obviously this is all provided if Cristobal is gone. I feel like I don't know. I don't need to keep throwing that disclaimer out there, but hopefully people know that at this point. But yeah, it was just weird because he was just here, right? And then he's only had 1 year running the Boise State team over there in Idaho. And I think it was kind of a mixed bag for them in his first year. I'm trying to look up their record right now just to see kind of how things went. 7-5, 5-3 in the Mountain West. They beat Fresno State, and Fresno State was a really, really hot team this year. They beat them 40-14, so I think that's a really good win. And then they beat BYU too, and we were talking about Sataki. So I think if you're looking for a defensive-minded guy, he obviously showed that he can run a defense well, but it's a matter of getting that consistency, because, man, they took a big step back after that 2019 season. But to be fair, they did lose a lot of talent. So you kind of have to look at it from both sides there.
Yeah, and you also have to remember, it was a COVID year last year. There wasn't much practice time prior to the season beginning, so you always have to make that disclaimer as well. But Avalos wouldn't be my first choice personally. But one thing that I've also thought about with looking at other head coaches is, Chip Kelly was here or in Eugene for 4 years. Mark Helfrich was in Eugene for 4 years. Taggart was here for one, and then Mario's now been here for 4 years. If you're Oregon, you really want a head coach that's here for maybe 8 years or 10 years. That's the ideal. So you maybe want to look at someone who thinks of Oregon as a destination place to coach. And that you maybe talk with Andy Avalos or a Justin Wilcox, for instance, who might really think of Oregon as, a program that they really want to be in for a long time, and try to really help this program get to a national championship level, which it hasn't been at for a long time. So, Avalos is definitely an interesting name. I have a feeling that, he'll definitely be linked to the job. But, I think there are definitely some other names that you might want to call before going to Avalos.
Yeah, the destination job is I think one of the biggest questions that is swirling around this, because I feel like I look at that question and I kind of think, is getting a West Coast guy what you're going to have to do to ultimately keep somebody out here for the long term? I mean, that's something that I don't know. I mean, it's a big question that we might be asking ourselves depending on what happens in these next 24 to 48 hours. But Nick, I kind of got away from what I wanted to talk about earlier. I'll keep an eye on the questions here, but let's talk about that Utah game because that was a brutal game. People in the chat probably saw me with Dylan on the post game show, but you were there at that game in Las Vegas. Want to talk about the game and then the presser? But just take me through what it was like at that game. I know it was a very pro Utah crowd, and I mean the Ducks just looked like they had no signs of life really in that game.
Yeah, I mean, you said it exactly. It was about 80-20 Utah fans there. And, it was really interesting. From the second they ran out of the tunnel, I really just didn't feel much energy from the sideline from this Oregon team the whole game. Noah Sewell really showed up and was playing with some energy and some fight out there, had a great game on defense. But really, other than that, I didn't see much emotion from this Oregon team in that game. I didn't really see much fight in that game. And that was really surprising to see considering how much they were, talking about, bringing, the Lumber back after losing to Utah so decisively 2 weeks ago. And that was pretty disappointing to see. And then, you go into the presser afterwards, it was just a crazy day at Allegiant Stadium in the press box the whole afternoon and evening leading up to the game and during the game, because everyone was really just on their phones and computers watching Twitter as these rumors unfolded out of Miami about Mario potentially leaving. So that all kind of built up to the press conference, which I'm sure many people saw, where, people were just bombarding Mario with questions about Miami. And I think he was pretty clearly ticked off that this is what people were asking him about. But it's also very fair that, this was the main story at that point. And, he deflected questions. He didn't say a ton that was too interesting, even though he did say that Oregon was preparing stuff for him. And so, now we're obviously here and we haven't really heard much since. But, it was just a pretty crazy day, and I can't help but think, and first of all, I'm not taking any away from Utah. They're very clearly the best team in the Pac-12 this year. They proved that. And that's going to be an amazing game against Ohio State at the Rose Bowl. I can't wait to watch that game. But I can't help but think that these rumors and all these distractions with Miami and Mario kind of maybe hindered Oregon's ability to play their very best football in that game.
Well, yeah, because he was asked that question after the game, and I actually have it up here just to see what his response was. So he was asked if players were distracted by the rumors, and he said, "I don't know what to tell you. I can tell you this: if I had any plans, if I had a decision to make, or if I had something to report, I would, and I wouldn't keep it one way or the other. Okay? Do I expect people to come at me? Yeah, I do. It happens every single year. Is there anything else to report besides that? There's nothing else to report besides that. When there ever is, if there ever is, I'll make sure to get it to you as fast as I can. So we saw the deflection again, but I'm there with you, Nick. I mean, just it's weird because they look just so, out of it, but part of it just goes back to how one-sided everything was. I think through much of that first half, Oregon's defense was playing pretty well. I mean, they were making Utah earn a lot of their yardage. Not as many laps. There were some lapses in coverage, sure, but I think that they came out and they looked, like they had some of that energy from that game against Oregon State. But I mean, I think because the defense was getting those stops and then the offense couldn't do anything, you can put the pieces together. It's not that confusing. That the defense just got tired. I would too if you're out on the field that long and then the offense can't convert any of those opportunities from those turnovers. It starts to wear on you after a long time, and you're going against a big physical team like Utah that has one of the better offensive and defensive lines in the country now.
Yeah, no question about it. And just looking at from a standpoint of if you thought Isaiah Crocker was going to be your leading receiver in this game, that's no one would have thought that prior, so that's just how crazy the game was in a poor way for the Ducks. And that's part of the reason why, once this coaching stuff gets settled, you really have no idea which team is going to show up in this Alamo Bowl against a really good Oklahoma team because they played really well most of the year, but then against the best team they faced all year besides Ohio State and Utah, they got destroyed twice in 3 weeks. You really can't get past that. So if Mario does stay, there's a lot of work to be done to kind of get this team back to where they need to be going forward.
Yeah, there's definitely plenty of work to be done. I think just the question that I've seen a lot of kind of just looking at the season as a whole and taking a step back, it's not even so much that they lost to Utah. I guess losing to Utah the way they did was terrible. But how did this team beat Ohio State? I just think it's so mind blowing to see how you can do something like that and then still just collapse like completely. And I think maybe that's because Ohio State looks like a totally different team now than they did against Oregon. They're really found their stride and have a dominant quarterback. CJ Stroud's one of the best in the country, but I don't think there's one answer. It just shows that there has to be a bunch of different things kind of going on here. I'm not trying to create a narrative or anything, but I mean, my God, I mean, how do you explain that?
I mean, there really isn't much to say. I don't have the answers for this one. I mean, I was just puzzled that, one time's inexcusable enough, but for this to happen again, that there has to be some real issues going on, behind the scenes to where they get demolished like this. It's just an embarrassing performance for the program. I think it could set them back, if Mario stays, and of course if Mario leaves, there's much bigger things to worry about. But it was very puzzling to watch in person.
The lack of adjustments is definitely something that was really shocking about that game. Obviously Oregon isn't going to be a completely transformed team after playing Utah 2 weeks ago, but you expected it to look better than that. I know we were rolling out our predictions over on Ducks Digest, and a lot of us had some similar scores. We had 5 in total, and 4 of them were picking Utah to win. But I think that they thought it was going to be closer than it was. I didn't see it. I mean, it was, let's see, so 38-7 and then 38. It was literally basically the same score. So I think that speaks a lot. Just the fact that that's kind of what happened. But had another question here from Danny. Thanks for the question. If Mario leaves, I think we should go after Matt Campbell. Thoughts? Do you want to start off with this one?
Sure. I think Matt Campbell is definitely a good candidate for head coaching job. He was rumored that if Lincoln Riley didn't go to USC was going to go after him. I think I also saw a report that UW went after him, and I don't know exactly what happened there, but Obviously, he didn't end up getting the job there, but I think he's definitely one of the top candidates that Oregon could go after. He has led that Iowa State program to a Fiesta Bowl win over the Ducks, so the Ducks have seen firsthand what that program's about. And I definitely think he's a good leader that has built a good culture, and that's something that Oregon has currently. So that's definitely probably one of the top three guys that I would have on a candidate list if Mario ended up leaving. I don't know. What do you think, Max?
Yeah, I got to cover that Fiesta Bowl last year in Arizona, and I mean the Ducks were just thoroughly dominated at the line of scrimmage in that one, much the same. It was probably the most basic game plan that you could see from Iowa State's standpoint. It was give the ball to Brees Hall, and then when that didn't work, give it to the 6'7" tight ends. You talk about defending the tight end has been a problem all season, and it was a problem last year too. So I think I get really excited about looking at Matt Campbell as a potential head coach because you think about Iowa State versus Oregon. I think there's a lot more resources here. He's around a whole heck of a lot more talent, I would think. If you're looking at just the West Coast, it's a little bit better than the Midwest, I would say. I mean, I haven't really been out there, visiting high schools in the Midwest, so maybe that's a little short-sighted. But if I think about him recruiting, with Oregon, that would be pretty big. So I think he'd be a tremendous coach to go after, just because I think he's a guy that can obviously develop a culture, get a lot of guys to buy in, and just get them to run through a wall for that coach.
No question.
Let's see here. Well, I know that you said it was about 40 minutes. So maybe we take like 5 more minutes and then we'll wrap this one up. Nick, that work?
That sounds good.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll keep an eye on the questions, guys, winding down here, but man, the storylines for this Oklahoma matchup in the Alamo Bowl with Lincoln Riley leaving, you have players that were on the current roster this year already finding transfer destinations. Jaden Hazelwood is going to Arkansas. That was one of their big receivers that made a move. And then you could have two teams that are coaching with interims at this point. Bob Stoops was the I almost want to say the Oklahoma representative in the press conference today, but he's the interim guy. So it's going to be. I think there's still Oklahoma's a pretty good school for the most part. They're. I saw a tweet from Eric Scopel saying that if we saw this matchup at the beginning of the year, we would have thought it was for the playoffs, but now things have changed drastically. But I think that Oklahoma is still a solid team. And, it'd be a good litmus test for kind of where this team's at heading into next year.
Yeah, no question. I think this is going to be a really fun matchup. It's kind of funny because there's a pretty decent chance that both teams are going to have interim coaches, and that's not something someone would have expected at all, 2 weeks ago. Both these teams were on the cusp of the CFP, and now, you got Bob Stoops on one end, and who knows? I heard someone talk about if Mario left and brought a lot of the staff with him, maybe Mike Bellotti would come back for Oregon. Then you have an old school Bellotti versus Stoops battle, just like 06 when Oklahoma came to Autzen and Oregon won off that onside kick and the referees calls and all that. I mean, there are a lot of different storylines you could go with this one. Of course, Oregon's returning to the Alamo Bowl for the first time since they blew a 31-0 lead with Jeff Walke and all that. So there's a lot of different ways that you can go about this matchup. And, it's tough to think about it too much right now with all the uncertainty with the coaching staff. But, once we get closer to the game, it's definitely going to be a good one to break down.
Yeah, we'll have to follow that one and kind of see where things unfold and what the Oregon team looks like. We have to see if I think Kayvon Thibodeau is pretty safe to say he's not going to be playing in this one. Obviously not really a lot to play, not on the lot on the line to play for here with the Alamo Bowl. I think the recruiting fallout would be really interesting to follow if Cristobal did end up going to Miami, but that's a whole other topic that I think we could get into, depending on what happens. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of clarity, by this point tomorrow. I think that's all we're going to have for the stream today. If you guys want to find Nick on Twitter, you can follow him at the name on your screen there at NickBat22. If you want to find me on Twitter, you can follow me at mtorresports. If you guys are watching the live stream, please do me a big favor and take a second and go subscribe to the channel. It's completely free and it really helps me out, helps me keep pumping out Ducks content. Trying to do these more often, so make sure to go hit that notification bell on your screen so that you don't miss any of these when we go live. And check us out over on ducksdigest.com. Got tons of Oregon content coming out all the time. And then go ahead and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you're listening to the Ducks Dish podcast on. Nick, thanks for hopping on, man. Thanks for everyone that tuned in. And we will see you in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Take care.